Hi, I'm Martha Scheeler, and I'm here to interview Laura Hobbs, who's running for Supervisor District 2 in Shasta County. Hi, Laura.
Hi, Martha. Thank you for having me.
How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
So we just want to talk about your campaign. And you've been out.
Yep, knocking on doors, meeting my constituents, talking to the people up in Igo and Ono who were victimized during that fire. What their wish list would be had they been given full control of that $50 million, which I think they should have been. Instead, they got $200,000, which isn't right. So they have serious concerns there. They need wider roads so that emergency equipment can get in and out of there. And also they've since then had fiber optic cables laid in the middle of the road. Mm-hmm. However, when they sealed off the hole in the middle, they didn't do a good job. So the roads are falling apart. Other things they could have used, like a tanker truck for their volunteer fire department.
Yeah, they come in handy, right?
Could have really come in handy.
Yeah.
They need fire hydrants. They need water tanks to store emergency supplies of water to help fight fires. There's just a number of different things that could have directly gone to that community that was injured to make it more safe in the future should another fire come through there. Stephanie Bridget, our DA, distributed that $50 million throughout the county. The most egregious was that she sent it to her own NGO, the Children's Legacy Fund. She sent them over $7 million. Many places throughout the county got money, but many of them had already been reimbursed by PG&E directly. Certain fire departments, certain first responders, those type of places. And so, yeah, there's a lot of people in the community that are upset, and rightfully so.
Right. And we know that first responders need money. When they want money to, like a bond, it's because it's for public protection. It's for the police. And the social services budget is what?
It's half of our county budget. It's about $330 million.
Right. So the social services budget for the county is $330 million, and it's half of the county budget. Mm-hmm. In our county with the issues that we face. It seems that law enforcement should have more financial support. If I were in law enforcement, I wouldn't really enjoy being used as leverage to get money out of citizens so that they can divert it to social services. There's a need for that, but if law enforcement had everything they needed, like a DA that prosecutes crimes, the good law enforcement can prevent a lot of those crimes, and a lot of those crimes are against children. Am I right?
Yeah, and there's the problem of catch and release, too, where we have the same people coming through and over again, where they're not actually being prosecuted to the full extent of the law, and we need to look into why that's happening. Not just here in Shasta, but statewide.
It's a complicated problem. There are solutions. Sheriff Johnson spoke when he was with the city of Anderson. He did a podcast with Dr. Drew. He spoke of working with those agencies that are interacting with those that help with drug treatment. Ways to get people to not be in this merry-go-round that they can't get off of criminal behavior. There are those that need to go to jail, and in ancient times, the cities had walls. You'll read in the Bible about the city without the walls. Nehemiah went and rebuilt the walls around the city of Jerusalem because not having walls, they were at risk of violence, direct violence against the citizens in the city. So basically in those times, the city had walls and the bad guys couldn't get in. They had to come through a gate. And in the same way, we do need to have a safe place for the innocent, the least of these, the elderly, the children, the infirm. They need to be safe.
We need to look at the rights of the ordinary tax-paying citizens.
Right.
And that's the whole thing that can get lost in all of this is when we're trying to find solutions to these complex social problems, someone has to stop and say, wait a second, what about the common person? Don't they have rights that supersede the rights of a person that wants to do drugs and camp out in this waterway, polluting the waterway?
What we're doing isn't working. What we did last time wasn't working. The time before that, what we were doing wasn't working.
And we can't just keep throwing money at it.
Money does not solve this problem. The fire department needs funds. I don't have an issue with them getting funds. It's not that it's easy for them or anything, but there are other revenue sources. But these people in the Zog fire, the victims of the Zog fire, they don't have other revenue sources.
No, they don't. And right now, one of the things they want and need to have is their community sign that says, IGO population so-and-so. And that's something so simple and so basic, yet they can't even get that right now.
Talk about feeling forgotten and left behind.
Exactly.
That's a tragedy. The people that are in that community have great value. Once people get into the governments, they're at their cocktail parties, they're with their people, they're going to this different dinner, that dinner, but they're losing touch with the people that they represent. And the problem is they think of them as, those people that don't live the life the same way I do.
Yeah, one of the citizens up there described themselves as they're being treated like the ugly stepchild. And another area that they're really concerned about, and I am too, honestly, because I live near there as well, is the whole Clear Creek Road is completely littered with garbage. And that's the route they take the veterans up to the veterans cemetery up there.
Isn't that such a
And it's really sad. I mean, it looks like a third world country with all the trash. Right now, the county has hired the city to manage that situation, to manage the dump, but they're not doing their job properly by leaving those roadways filthy the way that they are. And that whole area, the Clear Creek Preserve, is all really cool little hiking trails. And it shouldn't be juxtaposed with all this trash.
Somebody told me that one of the greatest things you can do, spiritual warfare, is to pick up litter, because leaving litter on the ground is actually a spiritual act. Just leaving it there and not doing something about it. Everybody thinks it's somebody else's problem.
Yeah.
And that's the problem we have in so many areas in government is we walk by litter on the ground and we think, what would me picking that one piece of litter do? What difference would it make? Because you got all this other litter. Well, the reality is if everybody did it, there wouldn't be anything left there. And it actually paints a picture of what we're looking at in election integrity and voting. And we're looking at government corruption and all the things that we see that are wrong. It is an act to not do anything. You're acting by not doing something. Whereas doing something about it, even if you're making mistakes, even if you think what you're doing isn't going to make a big difference, you do something.
One more note as far as the litter goes and the homelessness. That's a lot of the problem is they start collecting items and they have no way to store it. So they leave a lot of trash wherever they go. As members of this community, if you can think of it, Redding with a wall around it, like the analogy you use. But when you're here in this community, you need to abide by the rules of the community.
Right. In the cities with walls, it isn't that they didn't have poor people. The poor lived among them and they were safe among them because they weren't being taken advantage of by criminal elements within the indigent. And we have people that are literally using the homeless population in the worst possible ways. If there were such a thing as walls around the city, if there were laws and order and there were penalties for those that break the law.
One of the citizens I talked to, he's got across from him the old Red Lion Hotel, and apparently that's been used to house people temporarily, but the state is paying $1,700 a month for each unit. But it's become this huge area of drug dealing, prostitution, and in this program that they set up, there was no one set aside to police that unit and to create boundaries and say, hey, this is also somebody's neighborhood where people live, where people have businesses, And you cannot conduct those illegal activities here right in this neighborhood. And it's right off the I-5. And one thing that he's saying is that it's organized at a higher level to create these areas of distress in the city to bring down property values. And then all of a sudden, what do you know? Someone on top sees they can make a buck because now the property values have plummeted and they can go buy up this property for cheap.
Wow.
Just to summarize, I think it's okay to set boundaries and to have programs, but to have boundaries as well, to say this is how we're going to do it, and it has to be within the confines of the law. One thing I'm concerned about is that I see a lot of citizens of Shasta, they're having to take matters into their own hands as far as law enforcement. There's a gap. They've stopped responding to calls because they're overwhelmed or they aren't funded, or so citizens have taken the matter into their own hands, doing citizen patrols, actually physically clearing areas like the one rancher that I talked about. He had 30 campers all along Ohlone Creek, and he had to get his backhoe out and clear the camps all by himself because he didn't have, after a certain point, law enforcement wasn't responding anymore. So there is a lot that we can do as citizens. I just think it's unfortunate that it should fall on our shoulders, but what we're finding now more and more, not just in areas of our neighborhoods and our homes, but local governance, everything that has to happen now, it has to come from the citizens. We can't rely on our government.
Right. The police haven't failed us. Our government has failed the police, and our government has failed us. But there's a new law they're trying to put through that it's $1,000 per firearm, and you have to register once a year. Every firearm, $1,000 per gun. It would make it impossible for most people to even own a gun because they couldn't afford $1,000 a year.
Yeah, well, people just won't register. It's going to have the opposite effect. Is people aren't going to register their guns. There'll be a lot more guns out there on the market that are not registered.
Right, and this is the California DOJ, Bonta, the Attorney General, who released the CCW, concealed carry permit holders. These are women who have a concealed carry because they were victims of domestic violence, and he released their information. We're talking name, address. No, it wasn't a mistake.
No, it's retaliation, and they're trying to do that on a lot of different things now. They want to collect more and more information on us. I just heard recently that they're asking for people to report about their wells and the capacity of their wells, and they're saying, if you don't give us this information, we're going to make you pay a fine.
Tehama County's doing that right now.
Tehama County and also Shasta County, and they're creating a registry. They are creating a registry because ultimately what they want is to be able to tax or to charge fees for you to utilize that public water.
That's not public water. It's not. It's underground.
It's aquifer. It's God-given water.
Right. And it says in the Bible he can move the water anywhere he wants. There's these clay pots underground. If you've ever been to the Shasta Caverns, you'll know what a clay pot looks like. These people will find any way they can to charge you. This is California style.
Exactly.
Nazi government. Yeah.
And we have to fight against that. We need somebody on the board who will be strong and fight for Shasta's sovereignty and for the citizens' sovereignty in all respects, not just with the water rights, but with, the settlement distribution and the Zog fire, the windmills. We have to fight against that, even though we already made a local ordinance stating that we weren't going to have them here in our county. The state went ahead and changed some laws, AB 205 and 209. So we have to be proactive. We need somebody who's actually going to be strong and fight and not just say, okay, well, the state tells me to do this, I'll just comply, As a board, we have to say we do not comply. And as individual citizens, too, especially in regards to the Second Amendment, we have to say we do not comply.
The state of California has no problem at all just changing the rules if they don't like what Shasta does. They want to recall Supervisor Kevin Cry so that Gavin Newsom can appoint his replacement, appointing a majority just in time for Kathy Darling Allen to retire so that majority can appoint her replacement so that whoever is replaced is going to run our elections the way they've been running them, which is full of malfeasance and maladministration.
Yes, and I'd like to point out to the listeners, it was 3 weeks after the successful recall of Modi that the state came up with this law that enables the governor to appoint the successor for when there's a vacancy on the board.
It was in direct response because
Direct response.
by recalling Modi, somebody had a majority and they liked their majority. And by recalling, it was like, oh, no, we can't have that. We're going to say this. By the way, vote no on the recall. Vote no. You don't know who Governor Newsom's going to appoint.
Yep. And the fact that they responded so strongly and so quickly and so swiftly tells you that little old Shasta, has a lot of power, a lot of sway, and a lot of influence. And us average citizens going door to door to collect signatures to recall Modi was terrifying to them. And that means that what we're doing is correct. We're on the right track, and we need to continue getting involved locally, each individual citizen rising up and doing whatever they can to take control over their local government.
Right. And vote Laura Hobbs, vote Win Carpenter, vote no on the recall, vote yes on the charter county.
Oh, the other one that we want to mention is yes on term limit. So we need to vote on election day. The problem is that right now we have election month. It starts 3 weeks before and it goes 3 weeks after. And during that time, there's a lot of time for shenanigans to take place. So if you can, vote on election day. And when you get there, just check in a normal fashion and get a precinct ballot. Don't worry about your mail-in ballot that they sent you. Just check in at the precinct, get a precinct ballot, vote it at in the booth, and then turn it into them in a privacy sleeve. The reason I recommend this over sending in the mail-in ballot or bringing your mail-in ballot to the precinct on election day is because that mail-in ballot needs to be processed if it's in an envelope. So when you turn it in on election day, it then goes to the ROV office, and it has to be shuttled through the GILIS to sort into precincts, and then it will do the signature verification. So at that point, you have a chance of potentially being challenged, and they can say this signature doesn't look right. You could lose your vote. So the best way to do it is to vote at the precinct on the election day with the precinct ballot. Second best would be to turn in your mail-in ballot on election day. But keep in mind, if you do it that way, it could be a couple weeks before it's actually counted.
So the Secretary of State misprinted ballots, and one of the candidates for Dianne Feinstein's Senate seat, who's running as a Democrat against Adam Schiff and all the other 27 candidates in this race, her occupation was omitted from the ballot. Everybody else, it says so-and-so farmer, so-and-so businessman, so-and-so surgeon. Her name's on the ballot, but it doesn't say what her occupation is.
It's her ballot designation.
Ballot designation, right. So the Secretary of State notified everybody, all the clerks. There's a memo that we just happened to run across doing some other research, but she's a news anchor from she was with KTLA for 10 years, and now she's with a Fox station. She's a personality. It's her brand. And if somebody were to see local news anchor, or local news reporter, if they saw that, they would probably go to social media and find out who she is. And if they did, they'd find out she has an impressive resume. She's fought corruption in LA. She caught LA County overcharging people for water when they weren't going through as much of a drought as they said they were. They were leasing water, kind of like what we've gone through as well. And she's fought against human trafficking, went undercover with LAPD. Her designation of who she is was on the ballot. There would be people in Shasta County that would probably have found her and probably would have liked her more than Adam Schiff. I'm just going to say that. So she might have been a formidable candidate in the Democrat side. Maybe this was done intentionally so that she didn't, because she might have made it a close race. Yeah. And that wasn't what they wanted. So the second thing about the ballot issues is Mendocino County had their ballot printer accidentally printed and mailed ballots to every voter in the county with a supervisor district. Voters got that. It was a Republican ballot. It was sent to Democrat voters. And the press release for Mendocino County is, hey, so we've solved the problem. They're going to print some new ballots at their cost. And so now there's two sets of ballots out there floating around. A voter in Mendocino County told one of the chairs in New California State that he received the second ballot. And the only difference between that and the first ballot is they have a 5x7 yellow card in there to identify it as the different ballot. So what happens when you take the ballot out of the envelope and you separate it from the card? How do you know which ballot you're voting?
Oh,
So
yeah, there's so many shenanigans that take place, isn't
and
there?
on top of that, so the county has to figure out if this person is eligible to vote that ballot. So where's your secret ballot if they have to separate the ballot from the envelope and verify that the person voted the right ballot for their district?
Mm-hmm.
You understand? You lose that secret ballot. If the county's checking the ballot, they're going to see who you voted for. So if somebody shows up to vote and they're told that they've already voted, you wanted to talk about that.
Yeah, you can file a challenge in writing at the precinct that you're in, or at the elections office. If there's a really long line, you may have to go to the elections office to file a written challenge, but you can and should do this. It's protected by California Election Law 14245. All you have to do is sign that you swear or affirm that you have not previously voted in this election, either by vote by mail or at a polling place.
So when you go to show up to vote and they tell you that you've already voted, it's usually by mail, right?
You know, with early voting going on for so long.
How do you uncount that one? They've already separated the envelope. So how can they undo that? They can't.
But I still feel like it's worthy. Get a document and keep it for yourself as well, so that we have that. You can make a declaration with it saying that this happened to you.
And that's
that's
important.
Yeah, that's maladministration of the election.
Well, first of all, if I went to vote and somebody told me I'd already voted, I would be filing a report, a police report, to report a crime, because that's identity theft. Somebody stole your identity and voted with it.
This is our very freedom, the right to vote and have our votes counted accurately. And it's provided, it's a God-given right. It's in the Constitution. It's in the Declaration of Independence to have representatives by the will of the people.
And the only real solution to this is hand-counted, same-day voting, paper ballots. They're not counted the day before. You said they run them through the scanners 30 days before, but they don't, quote-unquote, don't tabulate them. Why are they running them through the scanners? Oh, yeah, that's right. They're not keeping the scanned images. They're being sent out somewhere and stored somewhere else where somebody can tabulate them off-site and figure out how many votes they need to cheat the election. Am I right?
Exactly. And that's why I don't recommend you vote early. I don't recommend that you bank the vote. We need hand-counted elections at the precincts using paper poll books. Ideally, it needs to be a one-day election.
Absolutely.
When you have 30 days before and 30 days after, you have so many opportunities to cheat.
Riverside County and all these other counties, I just remember Riverside specifically, New California State just did a demonstration election. If you go to newcaliforniastate.com and you look at their demo election, they counted it in one day. And they proved that they could count all the ballots in each precinct in one day.
Obviously, we were doing it for centuries before we even started machine counting. But I just want to stay on the moment of the one-day voting, because part of the problem is that we don't have a good chain of custody. And when you don't have a good chain of custody, that introduces opportunities to cheat. I asked the ROV office for their chain of custody procedures in a public records request. The long and the short of it is that I didn't get any response. I tried multiple times. They did give me a response for how they collect the ballots from the drop box, but they had no chain of custody on file for how the ballots were handled in-house. And part of the problem is that once they take it from downstairs where the Jill has sorted it, they have it in a locked cage down there. But then they take it upstairs to the blue room, they call it, and they remove the ballot from the envelope, and then they just sit it there on the shelf. It's not contained in a box or a bin. There's no seal. There's no dates. There's no initials.
Isn't there supposed to be a seal?
Yes, there should be a seal. So we need to have a good, and that's something that I could do as a supervisor, is draft a chain of custody procedure for our county that ensures that, first of all, we need to go back to one-day voting. But if we're going to have this broken system where it's 30 days before and 30 days after, we need to have a plan and a procedure in place that will protect those votes. They are precious, and right now they are not being given the amount of security that they deserve.
Mm-hmm. The chain of custody procedures are required.
Any break in the link, any chain, any link that's broken in the whole chain makes the whole process invalid.
It just almost looks intentional. Do you have anything coming up this week?
Just a lot of knocking on doors, honestly, and putting more signs up. In one night alone, I lost 5 signs.
We have Laura Hobbs on the line. She's running for District 2 in Shasta County. Laura, how are you?
Hello, how are you? Thank you for taking my call.
Sure. Well, what's on your mind?
Well, I did speak to the citizens of Igo Ono just recently, and they gave me a big list of things that they could use in their community. They need fire hydrants, they need wider roads so that fire personnel and big engines and trucks can make it up there in cases of emergency. And a lot of their roads were damaged, actually, by the fire, and they want those roads rebuilt. They don't even have a replacement on their community sign yet that, says Igo, population, whatever. And they're having a really hard time getting any of those things. They only got $200,000 out of this $50 million settlement. And it's just ridiculous.
Yeah. So why didn't all of that money go to the community where that happened? I mean, it's kind of interesting to me.
Unbelievable.
I think it should have all gone to them. And I don't like the way that Stephanie Bridget, the DA, was distributing it to pretty much everywhere except for them. Even places that had already been reimbursed by PG&E directly got money. And the citizens of Igo Ono were not consulted in any way about how they wanted that money distributed. She refused to meet with them. And when she finally did, she wouldn't let them record it, so they walked out. Because people have been telling them all kinds of different stories and lies, and they have no way to verify the truth from the lies. So it's a terrible injustice.
What would you do as a supervisor to improve their situation? I think one thing I do have to say, I've interviewed a lot of people, and I have to say, Laura, that when I did interview you, the thing I found impressive, each time I send out usually a text out to everybody who comes on the program that's running for office, and I ask them the three things that they want to talk about that's within the jurisdiction of what office they're running for. And one candidate even told me that I have to go back and look at my statement. It's like, you can't remember? And I was very impressed because most candidates, we have to work around their jurisdiction on things. I had one candidate call in from your district that talked about the schools, wanted to talk about schools, and I reminded that person that the Board of Supervisors doesn't have jurisdiction over the schools. What is it in your wheelhouse that you're running for? You can tell the folks that you do. And I remember you sending me back a list of 8 things, and every one of those things had to do with your jurisdiction as a supervisor. So are you seeing this thing in Igo Ono as being maybe your number one thing that you'd want to do in the county?
It's certainly up in the top 3 because fighting for the citizens of Shasta County is the job of a Board of Supervisors. And we need someone in there that is going to stand up and fight for people in our district and for the whole county. And the other one major thing is the elections. We need to have free and fair elections. We need to know that our votes were counted accurately. So that's a huge issue in my opinion. And what happened in the Acid Canal when it went dry, that's another prime example in 2022. Wow. That's another example of how the citizens were not treated properly. And I would not stand for that. I would do everything within my power as a Board of Supervisor to prevent those things from happening in the future and to right the wrongs. So if it means filing lawsuits to rectify the situation, that's what I would recommend.
Well, Laura, first of all, it's Laura Hobbs. She's running for District 2. And thank you for calling in. That was great stuff. And again, I love it when candidates call in and they actually get to the point. And so thank you very much for that. Have a great day. And Laura, thank you.
What people need to do right now, if you're listening to this, if you go to votelaurahobbs.com, you can,
make a donation.
But also share her content, repost her stuff, and then also be aware that when you're coming and going throughout the day, you may talk to somebody that isn't in her district, but they may know 3 people that are in her district that they talk to. Talk about Laura, because people are talking about the person with the pretty white signs, and they're not talking about Laura if her sign is gone because somebody has stolen it. So we should absolutely talk about Laura everywhere we go.
Thank you, Martha. I appreciate that.
Be brave. Laura's brave. She was brave when she stood up at the meetings and to analyze the data, and she was able to demonstrate the fraud that happened. And that was her first brave act. She's being brave, and we should be brave with her. The United States of America isn't going to be saved if we just count on somebody somewhere else to do something. So we need to help her. We need to help to right the ship here in California. It's not enough to dream of living somewhere else.
Stay here and fight.
Stay and fight. That's right. Yep. Okay, well, thank you, Laura, for meeting with me.
Thank you so much. God bless you.
God bless you, Laura. Have a great week.
Thanks, you too.